Crimson Trials. Elira Dorn had spent her life feeling like she was waiting for something, though she never knew what. But when she stepped into the old ruins and the sky above her shuddered, the waiting ended. The air tightened. The torches flared. And when she turned, he was there golden-eyed, watching her like she belonged to him. "You left me once," he murmured. "But this time, I will not let you leave again." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Old Stones. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and impending rain as Elira Dorn navigated the overgrown path toward the ruins. At 62, her knees protested more than they used to, a dull ache that mirrored the persistent, low-thrumming unease she'd carried within her for as long as she could remember. It was a feeling of incompleteness, like a melody half-remembered, a story unfinished. Her silver hair, once the color of spun moonlight, was pulled back in a loose braid, a few strands escaping to frame a face etched with the delicate tracery of time and a quiet, enduring sadness. Her eyes, a faded sapphire, held a depth of knowing, a hint of something beyond the mundane. She adjusted the strap of her worn leather satchel, the weight of her sketching tools a familiar comfort. Elira had always found solace in art, in capturing the fleeting beauty of the world around her. It was a way to anchor herself, to make sense of the swirling chaos that often threatened to consume her from within. Today, however, even the prospect of sketching the ancient ruins of Blackwood Abbey couldn't quite dispel the unsettling feeling that had taken root deep in her bones. Blackwood Abbey. The locals of the sleepy, forgotten town of Havenwood whispered stories about it, tales of dark rituals and restless spirits. Most dismissed them as folklore, the ramblings of old women and bored teenagers. But Elira had always felt a pull towards the place, a strange, inexplicable draw that she couldn't ignore. It was as if the stones themselves were calling to her, whispering secrets only she could hear. The path opened onto a clearing, and Elira gasped softly. The abbey, or what remained of it, was a breathtaking spectacle of crumbling grandeur. Walls of weathered gray stone reached towards the bruised, twilight sky, their jagged edges silhouetted against the gathering storm clouds. Arches, once magnificent, now stood fragmented, like skeletal fingers pointing accusingly at the heavens. Ivy, thick and ancient, snaked its way across the decaying stonework, a verdant shroud clinging to the bones of the past. A shiver traced its way down Elira's spine, not entirely from the chill wind that whipped through the clearing. There was a palpable energy here, a sense of waiting. It resonated with the familiar unease within her, amplifying it, making her heart beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She stepped cautiously into the ruins, her boots crunching on fallen leaves and broken shards of stone. The air grew noticeably colder, the scent of rain intensifying. The first fat drops began to fall, splattering against the ancient stones, darkening them to the color of dried blood. Elira found a relatively sheltered spot beneath a partially collapsed archway and opened her satchel, pulling out her sketchbook and a charcoal pencil. Her fingers, stiff from the cold, moved almost automatically, sketching the outline of the abbey, capturing the play of light and shadow, the stark beauty of decay. As she worked, the feeling of being watched intensified. It wasn't a malevolent presence, not exactly, but it was insistent, as if someone or something was waiting for her to acknowledge it. She paused, her pencil hovering over the page, and slowly lifted her gaze. The sky above the ruins shuddered. It wasn't a physical tremor, but a visual distortion, as if the very fabric of reality was rippling. The torches she had lit earlier, placed strategically around the clearing to illuminate her work, flared suddenly, their flames burning with an unnatural, almost violet light. The air tightened, a constricting pressure that made it difficult to breathe. And then he was there. He stood at the edge of the clearing, where the shadows of the forest met the crumbling walls of the abbey. He was tall, impossibly so, his figure a dark silhouette against the flickering torchlight. Elira couldn't make out his features clearly, but she could feel his presence, a powerful, magnetic force that drew her in. Her breath caught in her throat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. He moved with a grace that was both predatory and mesmerizing, his steps silent on the rain-soaked ground. As he drew closer, the violet light from the torches illuminated him, revealing details that sent a jolt of both fear and something else through Alira's body. His hair was the color of raven's wings, thick and slightly wild, falling to just below his jawline. His face was a study in sharp angles and planes, a face that spoke of strength, of hardship, of a haunting, ancient sorrow. But it was his eyes that captured her, held her captive. They were the color of molten gold, glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through her, to see straight into her soul. He stopped a few feet away, his golden gaze fixed on her. The silence stretched, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain and the frantic beating of Alira's heart. Then he spoke, his voice a low, resonant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the very stones beneath their feet. "You left me once," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion Alira couldn't quite decipher. It was a blend of accusation, of longing, of something that felt achingly familiar. "But this time, I will not let you leave again." Alira stared at him, speechless, her mind reeling. She had never seen this man before in her life. She was certain of it. And yet there was something about him, something about his eyes, his voice, that stirred a dormant memory, a feeling of recognition that defied all logic. Who was he? And what did he mean by "you left me once"? The rain continued to fall, washing over them, blurring the lines between reality and something far older, far stranger. The feeling of being watched had vanished, replaced by a dizzying sensation of falling, of being pulled into the depths of those golden eyes, into a past she didn't remember, a destiny she couldn't comprehend. What had she stumbled into? Chapter 2. A glimpse of golden eyes. The rain plastered Alira's hair to her forehead, the cold seeping into her bones, yet she remained frozen, transfixed by the stranger's intense gaze. His words, "You left me once," echoed in the sudden silence, a nonsensical phrase that nevertheless resonated with a disturbing familiarity. Her mind, usually a refuge of logic and artistic observation, felt like a storm-tossed sea, waves of confusion crashing against the shores of her reason. I don't understand," she finally managed, her voice a shaky whisper that was almost swallowed by the wind. Her hand, still clutching the charcoal pencil, trembled slightly. She tried to regain her composure, to summon the quiet dignity that had always been her shield against the world, but it felt flimsy, inadequate in the face of this presence. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took another step closer, his golden eyes never leaving hers. The flickering torchlight played across his features, highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the slight curve of his lips, the almost imperceptible furrow in his brow. He was breathtakingly beautiful, in a way that was both rugged and refined, a beauty that hinted at something wild, something untamed, and something deeply, deeply sad. "You don't remember," he said, his voice softer now, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in her very chest. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, tinged with a profound, almost unbearable melancholy. Alira shook her head, a slow, bewildered movement. "Remember what? I've never seen you before in my life." A flicker of something pain? Frustration? Crossed his face, quickly masked by an expression of stoic resolve. He reached out a hand, slowly, as if afraid to startle her. Alira instinctively flinched, a primal fear rising within her. He paused, his hand hovering in the air between them, the rain washing over his long, elegant fingers. "May I?" he asked, his voice a low, husky murmur. Alira hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back to the relative safety of Havenwood, to the familiar comfort of her small cottage and her quiet, predictable life. But something held her rooted to the spot. A strange, inexplicable pull, a feeling of connection. It was as if an invisible thread bound her to this stranger, a thread woven from something ancient and powerful. She nodded, a barely perceptible movement, her eyes still locked on his. He lowered his hand, his fingertips brushing lightly against her cheek. The touch was surprisingly gentle, a feather-light caress that sent a shiver through her, not of fear, but of something else. Something she couldn't name, something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. His skin was warm, despite the cold rain, and the contact sparked a strange tingling sensation that spread through her body, like a dormant current suddenly awakened. As his fingers traced the line of her cheekbone, his golden eyes searched hers, as if looking for something, some sign of recognition. And then, for the briefest of moments, Alira saw it. A flash, a flicker of memory, so fleeting that she almost dismissed it as a trick of the light. A vision of a moonlit forest, a whispered promise, a pair of golden eyes filled with a love so profound, so all-consuming, that it took her breath away. The vision vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving her gasping, disoriented. She stumbled back, breaking the contact, her hand flying to her chest, where her heart was pounding like a drum. What was that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He lowered his hand, his expression unreadable. "A memory," he said softly. "A fragment of a past you have forgotten." "Forgotten?" Alira repeated, her mind struggling to grasp the implications of his words. "But how is that possible?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked up at the stormy sky, his profile stark and beautiful against the backdrop of the raging elements. The rain seemed to intensify, the wind howling through the ruins like a mournful cry. "The moon has been searching for you, Alira," he said, his voice barely audible above the storm. "For a very long time." His words, cryptic and unsettling, hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. The moon? Searching for her? It was madness. Utter, complete madness. And yet a part of her, a deep, buried part of her, recognized the truth in his words. A truth she couldn't articulate, couldn't explain, but felt with every fiber of her being. He turned back to her, his golden eyes blazing with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. "I am Lorcan," he said, his voice low and resonant. "And you, Alira, you are mine." The possessive claim, spoken with such unwavering conviction, sent another shiver through her. It was both terrifying and strangely alluring. She wanted to deny it, to reject the absurdity of his words, but the look in his eyes, the raw emotion that radiated from him, stopped her. He believed it. He truly believed it. And in that moment, looking into those golden eyes, Alira felt a flicker of something akin to belief herself. A seed of doubt, planted in the fertile ground of her confusion, began to sprout. Who was Lorcan? And what was this impossible connection he claimed to have with her? And why did that fleeting, impossible memory feel so real? Chapter 3. Echoes of a Forgotten Promise. Lorcan's declaration, "You are mine," hung in the air, heavy and resonant, clashing with the relentless drumming of the rain. Alira stared at him, her mind struggling to reconcile the impossible with the strangely familiar. The logical part of her brain, the part that had always governed her life, screamed that this was madness, that she should turn and run. But another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, urged her to stay, to listen, to try and understand.
"Mean?"
she repeated, her voice a breathy whisper, laced with both fear and a flicker of something else. Something that felt dangerously close to longing. "I don't understand. I'm no one's." A shadow of pain crossed Lorcan's face, a fleeting expression that was quickly masked by his usual stoic demeanor. He took a step back, as if sensing her apprehension, creating a space between them that felt both necessary and profoundly unsettling. "You may not remember," he said, his voice low and laced with a sadness that resonated deep within Alira's own hidden well of sorrow, "but there was a time when you belonged to me, and I to you. A time before the forgetting." The forgetting? He spoke the word as if it were a tangible thing, a curse, a burden. Alira shook her head, her silver hair, now plastered to her face, swaying with the movement. I don't have any memory of that. Of you." Lorcan closed his eyes for a moment, his jaw clenched tight, as if fighting back a wave of powerful emotion. When he opened them again, the golden intensity had softened, replaced by a profound weariness. "I know," he said softly. "The curse saw to that." "Curse?" Alira repeated, the word sending a shiver down her spine. This was escalating quickly, moving from the realm of the bizarre to the outright fantastical. And yet, surrounded by the ancient, whispering ruins, beneath the storm-racked sky, it felt strangely believable. Lorcan nodded, his gaze fixed on the crumbling stones of the abbey, as if reading a story written in their weathered surfaces. "A curse laid upon us centuries ago," he said, his voice distant, as if he were speaking from a dream. "A curse that stole your memories, that separated us, that bound us to this cycle." He turned back to her, his golden eyes searching hers, pleading for understanding, for recognition. We are soul-bound, Alira. Bound together by a love that transcends time, that defies even death itself. But a jealous rival, a woman scorned, cursed us. She stole your memories, erased me from your mind, and condemned us to an endless cycle of separation and reunion. A cycle that always ends in tragedy. Alira listened, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. Soulbound? Curses? Cycles of tragedy? It sounded like something out of a Gothic novel, a fantastical tale spun from moonlight and shadows. And yet the intensity of Lorcan's gaze, the raw emotion in his voice, the strange, unsettling familiarity of his presence, it all pointed to a truth that defied logic, a truth that resonated deep within her soul. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. This is too much." Lorcan reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly over hers, but he didn't touch her. "I know it is," he said softly, "but I need you to trust me, Alira. I need you to try and remember." Trust him? Trust this stranger who claimed she was a soulmate, who spoke of curses and forgotten promises. It was a leap of faith, a jump into the unknown. And yet she couldn't deny the pull, the undeniable connection she felt to him. "How?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the wind. "How can I remember something that's been erased?" Lorcan's gaze softened, a flicker of hope sparking in his golden eyes. "The ruins," he said, gesturing towards the crumbling abbey. "This place, it holds the key. It was here that we made our vow, beneath the light of the full moon. It was here that the curse was laid upon us. And it is here, perhaps, that we can break it." He looked at her, his expression earnest, pleading. "Stay with me, Alira," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Let me show you. Let me help you remember." The rain continued to fall, washing over them, a cleansing torrent that seemed to wash away the years, the doubts, the fears. Alira looked at Lorcan, at his intense golden eyes, at the raw, vulnerable hope that flickered within them. She looked at the ruins, at the ancient stones that whispered secrets of a forgotten past. And she knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that she couldn't walk away. She had to stay. She had to try. "All right," she finally spoke, her voice gaining a subtle strength she hadn't realized she still possessed. She was tired of the half-life, the empty echoes. She was ready for the truth, no matter how impossible. "All right, Lorcan. I'll stay." The wind seemed to sigh around them, as if a great, ancient power had been holding its breath, waiting for her answer. What had she just agreed to? Chapter 4. The scent of pine and thunder. A hesitant smile, the first Alira had seen from him, touched Lorcan's lips. It transformed his face, softening the harsh angles, erasing, for a fleeting moment, the centuries of sorrow that seemed etched into his very being. It was a glimpse of the man he might have been, the man he perhaps still was, beneath the weight of the curse. "Thank you, Alira," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You won't regret this." He turned and gestured towards the heart of the ruins, where a large, circular chamber lay partially exposed to the elements. The roof had long since collapsed, leaving only the skeletal framework of the walls standing, reaching towards the stormy sky like supplicating arms. "This was the Abbey's chapel," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "It was here that we were married." Married. The word sent a jolt through Alira, a strange mixture of shock and recognition. She followed him into the chamber, her boots crunching on broken tiles and scattered debris. The rain fell steadily, creating a shimmering curtain that separated them from the outside world, enclosing them in a cocoon of ancient stone and whispered secrets. Lorcan stopped in the center of the chamber, beneath the open sky. He closed his eyes for a moment, his head tilted back, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he opened them again, his golden gaze fixed on Alira. "The air here is thick with memories," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Can you feel it?" Alira closed her own eyes, trying to sense what he was talking about. At first, all she felt was the cold, the dampness, the scent of wet earth and decaying stone. But then, slowly, subtly, something shifted. A faint fragrance, like pine needles and thunder, filled the air, a scent that was both wild and strangely comforting. It stirred something within her, a faint, flickering memory, like a dream on the edge of waking. I think so," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Lorcan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "The curse, it couldn't erase everything," he said. "It stole your conscious memories, but it couldn't touch the essence of our bond. It's still there, Alira, buried deep within you. And this place, it can help us bring it to the surface." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her cold fingers. His grip was firm, reassuring, yet gentle, as if afraid of breaking something fragile. Alira didn't pull away. She allowed him to lead her towards a large, flat stone that lay in the center of the chamber, partially covered in moss and lichen. "This was the altar," he said, his voice a low murmur. "It was here that we stood, hand in hand, and made our vows to each other. Vows of love, of loyalty, of eternity." He looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a depth of emotion that took her breath away. "Do you remember anything, Alira? Anything at all?" Alira closed her eyes again, focusing on the scent of pine and thunder, on the warmth of Lorcan's hand in hers, on the ancient energy that thrummed through the ruins. She tried to reach back, to push past the veil of forgetfulness, to grasp the elusive fragments of memory that danced just beyond her reach. And then she saw it. A flash, a flicker of an image, so vivid, so real, that it made her gasp. She saw herself, younger, her hair of vibrant silver, her eyes shining with a love so profound that it brought tears to her eyes. She saw Lorcan, standing before her, his golden eyes blazing with the same fierce devotion. She saw them holding hands, their fingers intertwined, a silver ring gleaming on her finger. She heard the murmur of vows, the whisper of promises, the echo of a love that defied time itself. The vision faded, leaving her breathless, disoriented. She opened her eyes, her gaze locking with Lorcan's. He was watching her, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I saw something," she whispered, her voice shaking. "A glimpse of us, of a wedding." A flicker of relief, of joy, crossed Lorcan's face. He squeezed her hand, his grip tightening slightly. "It's working," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "The memories are returning." But even as he spoke, the air around them shifted, growing colder, heavier. The scent of pine and thunder was replaced by a cloying, sickly sweet odor, like decaying flowers and stagnant water. The torches, which had been burning steadily, began to flicker and sputter, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the walls. Lorcan's head snapped up, his golden eyes narrowing, his expression hardening into a mask of wary alertness. He released Alira's hand, his body tensing, as if preparing for a fight. "What is it?" Alira asked, her voice filled with a sudden, primal fear. "She's here," Lorcan said, his voice a low growl. "The one who cursed us. She knows we're trying to break it, and she won't let us." A cold, chilling laughter echoed through the ruins, a sound that sent shivers down Alira's spine. It was a sound of pure malice, of ancient hatred, of a jealousy that had festered for centuries. And Alira knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that their attempt to reclaim their lost past had just become infinitely more dangerous. Who or what was coming? Chapter 5. Beneath a Fractured Moon. The laughter faded, leaving an unnerving silence in its wake, punctuated only by the relentless drumming of the rain. The air grew thick and heavy, the sickly sweet odor intensifying, making Alira's stomach churn. She looked at Lorcan, his profile etched against the flickering torchlight, his body taut and ready, a warrior poised for battle. The fear that had been simmering within her now surged, threatening to overwhelm her. "Who is she?" Alira whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm.
"What does she want?"
Lorcan didn't answer immediately. He scanned the shadows that danced around the edges of the chamber, his golden eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. He looked different, more primal, more dangerous. The air around him seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. "Her name is Lyra," he said, his voice a low growl, laced with a bitterness that spoke of centuries of pain and resentment. She was to be my bride. Before I met you." Alira's breath caught in her throat.
"A rival."
A scorned woman. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, painting a picture of a love triangle that had spanned centuries, a tragedy fueled by jealousy and betrayal. "She was a sorceress," Lorcan continued, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. "Powerful and ruthless. She craved power, control. And when I chose you, when I defied her and broke our betrothal, she cursed us. She condemned us to this endless cycle of separation and loss." A figure emerged from the shadows, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment. Alira gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. Lyra was beautiful, ethereally so. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her hair a cascade of shimmering black, her eyes the color of deep, glacial ice. She wore a gown of flowing black silk, adorned with intricate silver embroidery that seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering torchlight. But her beauty was marred by a cruel, twisted smile that played on her lips, a smile that promised pain and suffering. "Lorcan," she purred, her voice like the scraping of ice against ice. So faithful, so persistent, still clinging to the ghost of a love that was never meant to be. Lorcan didn't respond, his gaze fixed on Lyra, his body coiled and ready. Alira could feel the tension radiating from him, a palpable force that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Lyra's gaze shifted to Alira, her ice blue eyes narrowing, assessing her with a cold, calculating scrutiny. "And you," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The replacement. The weak, mortal woman who stole what was rightfully mine." Alira flinched under the intensity of Lyra's gaze, but she stood her ground, refusing to cower. She might not remember her past, but she wouldn't let this creature intimidate her. "I stole nothing," Alira said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the fear that churned within her.
"L'aucune chose me."
He chose love over power. A cruel laugh escaped Lyra's lips, a sound that echoed through the ruins, mocking Alira's defiance.
"Love?" she scoffed.
"A fleeting, fragile emotion. A weakness. Power is eternal. And I will have it, even if I have to tear it from your cold, dead hands." She raised her hands, her long, elegant fingers adorned with rings that glittered with an unnatural light. The air around her began to shimmer and distort, the sickly sweet odor intensifying, making Alira's head spin. "Enough, Lyra," Lorcan said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "This ends tonight." He stepped forward, placing himself between Alira and Lyra, a shield against the sorceress's power. Alira watched in awe and terror as Lorcan began to change. His body seemed to grow larger, his muscles rippling beneath his skin, his features shifting, becoming more animalistic. His eyes glowed with an even brighter, more intense golden light, and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest. He was transforming into something not human. Lyra laughed again, a sound of pure delight, tinged with madness. "The wolf," she said, her voice filled with a cruel mockery. "So predictable, so easily controlled." She flicked her wrist, and a bolt of dark energy shot towards Lorcan, striking him in the chest. He staggered back, a cry of pain escaping his lips, but he didn't fall. He stood his ground, his eyes blazing with defiance, his body still shifting, still transforming. The rain intensified, the wind howling through the ruins like a banshee's wail. The torches flickered and died, plunging the chamber into near darkness, illuminated only by the eerie glow of Lyra's magic and the fractured, intermittent moonlight that broke through the storm clouds above. The battle had begun. A battle between two ancient lovers, a sorceress and a werewolf. And Alira, caught in the middle, was the prize. But which side would she choose, when her memory was still a fractured, incomplete mosaic? Chapter 6. The Unveiling of Silver Creek. The near darkness was punctuated by flashes of Lyra's dark magic and the increasingly feral glow of Lorcan's eyes. Alira, pressed back against the cold, damp wall of the ruined chapel, watched in horrified fascination as the man she was beginning to understand she had once loved did love. A treacherous whisper in her heart insisted completed his transformation. He was no longer entirely human. He stood on two legs, but his body was covered in thick, dark fur, his hands and feet tipped with razor-sharp claws. His face was a terrifying yet strangely beautiful blend of human and wolf, his golden eyes burning with a primal intensity. He was magnificent, terrifying, and undeniably Lorcan. The air crackled with the opposing energies of Lyra's sorcery and Lorcan's raw, untamed power. He snarled, a deep, guttural sound that resonated through Alira's very bones, and lunged at Lyra. She met his attack with a wave of her hand, a shield of dark energy shimmering into existence, deflecting his claws. The impact sent sparks flying, illuminating the chamber in brief, violent bursts. "You cannot win, Lorcan," Lyra hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. "You are bound to me, to my curse. You will always lose."
"She will always die,"
Lorcan roared, a sound of pure rage and defiance, and attacked again, his claws tearing at Lyra's shield, ripping through the fabric of her magic. She stumbled back, a flicker of surprise crossing her face, quickly replaced by a renewed surge of power. Alira watched, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She had to do something. She couldn't just stand here and watch Lorcan fight and possibly die for her. But what could she do? She was just an ordinary woman, armed with nothing but a sketchbook and a charcoal pencil. Then she remembered the silver ring. The ring she had seen in her fleeting vision, the ring that had gleamed on her finger as she and Lorcan exchanged their vows. It was a symbol of their love, of their bond. And it might be a key. She fumbled in her satchel, her fingers trembling, searching for the small, velvet pouch where she kept her most treasured possessions. Her fingers closed around it, and she pulled it out, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a silver ring. It was simple, yet elegant, a band of intricately carved silver, depicting two wolves intertwined beneath a full moon. It was the ring from her vision. Alira stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. She had found it years ago, tucked away in an old, forgotten chest in her attic. She had been drawn to it, inexplicably, and had kept it ever since, a silent reminder of a past she couldn't remember. She slipped the ring onto her finger, the cold metal a familiar comfort against her skin. As she did so, a surge of energy coursed through her, a warmth that spread from her fingertips to the very core of her being. She gasped, her head spinning, as memories, fragmented and fleeting, flooded her mind. She saw Lorcan, his human face smiling at her, his golden eyes filled with love. She saw them walking hand in hand through a moonlit forest, their laughter echoing through the trees. She saw them exchanging vows beneath the full moon, their love a beacon in the darkness. And then she saw Lyra, her face contorted with rage and jealousy, her hands raised in a curse, her voice screaming words of hatred and vengeance. She saw Lorcan fall, his body twisting in agony, his eyes filled with a desperate plea. She saw herself collapsing to the ground, her memories fading, her love lost. The memories vanished, leaving her breathless, shaken, but whole. She remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough to know that Lorcan was telling the truth. Enough to know that she loved him. She looked up, her gaze locking with Lorcan's. He was locked in a fierce struggle with Lyra, his body battered and bleeding, but his eyes still burned with that fierce, unwavering determination. He saw the ring on her finger, and a flicker of recognition, of hope, crossed his face. "Elira!" he roared, his voice strained. "The stream. Silver Creek. It's the only way. Silver Creek." The name triggered another memory, a faint, flickering image of a hidden stream, its waters shimmering with a silvery light, a place of power, of sanctuary. Elira knew what she had to do. She had to find Silver Creek. It was their only hope. She turned and ran, dodging falling debris and bursts of Lyra's dark magic, her heart pounding with a desperate urgency. She had to find the stream, not just for Lorcan, but for herself, for the love they had lost, for the future they might still have. The fractured moon seemed to urge her onward, a silent witness to her desperate flight. Where was this creek? Chapter 7. Shadows cast by ancient trees. Elira burst from the crumbling chapel, the torrential rain instantly plastering her clothes to her body, chilling her to the bone. The wind whipped around her, tearing at her hair, making it difficult to see. The abbey grounds were a treacherous maze of fallen stones, overgrown vegetation, and deep shadows, illuminated only by the sporadic flashes of lightning and the distant, eerie glow of Lyra's magic. She had no clear idea where Silver Creek was, only the fragmented memory Lorcan's words had triggered a hidden stream, shimmering silver, a place of power. She had to trust her instincts, to rely on the faint, flickering pulse she felt deep within her, a connection to Lorcan, to their shared past. She ran, her lungs burning, her legs aching, stumbling over unseen obstacles, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could hear the sounds of the battle behind her, Lorcan's roars and Lyra's chilling laughter, a constant reminder of the danger she was in, the stakes she was fighting for. She headed towards the ancient forest that bordered the abbey grounds, the trees looming before her like dark, menacing figures. The forest was a place of deep shadows and whispered secrets, a place where the veil between worlds seemed thin, almost transparent. As she entered the forest, the rain lessened slightly, sheltered by the thick canopy of leaves. The air grew colder, heavier, the scent of pine and damp earth intensifying. She could hear the rustling of leaves, the creaking of branches, the scurrying of unseen creatures, a symphony of sounds that both soothed and unsettled her. She followed a narrow, overgrown path, her eyes scanning the darkness, searching for any sign of the stream. She remembered walking this path with Lorcan, centuries ago, their hands intertwined, their laughter echoing through the trees. The memory, sharp and vivid, brought a pang of longing to her heart, a bittersweet ache for a past she was only just beginning to reclaim. She stumbled, her foot catching on a root, and nearly fell. She caught herself on a nearby tree, her hand pressing against the rough bark. As she did so, she felt a strange vibration, a subtle humming that seemed to resonate from the tree itself. She looked up, her gaze following the trunk of the tree towards the branches above. The tree was ancient, its branches gnarled and twisted, reaching towards the sky like supplicating arms. And nestled among the branches, almost hidden from view, was a small, silver bird, its feathers shimmering in the faint moonlight that filtered through the leaves. The bird looked at her, its eyes bright and intelligent, and chirped softly, a clear, melodic sound that cut through the silence of the forest. Then, it took flight, soaring towards the east, its silver feathers gleaming like a beacon in the darkness. Elira felt a surge of hope. The bird. It was a sign, a guide. She had to follow it. She pushed herself off the tree and continued along the path, her pace quickening, her heart pounding with a renewed sense of purpose. She followed the bird, her gaze fixed on its shimmering form as it flitted through the trees, leading her deeper and deeper into the forest. The path began to slope downwards, winding its way through a dense thicket of ferns and undergrowth. She could hear the sound of rushing water, growing louder with each step, a sound that filled her with both anticipation and trepidation. And then she saw it, a break in the trees, a glimpse of shimmering silver, a hidden stream, its waters reflecting the fractured moonlight like 1,000 scattered diamonds. Silver Creek. She pushed her way through the last of the undergrowth and emerged onto the bank of the stream. It was beautiful, ethereal, a place of magic and mystery. The water was crystal clear, flowing over smooth, silver stones, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. The air here felt different, lighter, cleaner, the oppressive weight of Lyra's magic fading, replaced by a sense of peace, of serenity. But her relief was short-lived. A cold, chilling voice broke the silence, shattering the tranquility of the scene. "Looking for something, Alira?" Alira spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Lyra stood on the opposite bank of the stream, her black gown flowing around her, her ice-blue eyes burning with a cold, triumphant fire. She had followed her, and she looked even more menacing, more powerful than before. How had she found this place so quickly? And what was going to happen now? Chapter 8. The Dance of Fear and Desire. Lyra's smile was a cruel, predatory curve, a stark contrast to the serene beauty of Silver Creek. The water shimmered between them, a fragile barrier against the sorceress's power. Alira's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She had found the sanctuary, but she was far from safe. "You cannot escape me, Alira," Lyra said, her voice dripping with malice. "This attachment you have to the wolf is meaningless. He is bound to me, to my curse. You are merely an obstacle, a temporary distraction." Alira stood her ground, her hand instinctively going to the silver ring on her finger, the cool metal a source of strength and reassurance. "He is not yours," she said, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. "He chose me centuries ago, and he chooses me now." Lyra laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees, mocking Alira's defiance. "Choice," she scoffed. "He has no choice. The curse ensures it. He will always be drawn to you, and you will always die. It is a cycle, an endless dance of pain and loss. And I am the choreographer." She raised her hand, and the air around her began to shimmer and distort, the sickly sweet odor intensifying, making Alira's head spin. The water of Silver Creek began to churn, the silvery light flickering and fading as if struggling against Lyra's encroaching power. Alira knew she couldn't fight Lyra directly. She had no magic, no weapons, only her wits and the faint, flickering memories that were slowly returning to her. But she had something Lyra didn't, Lorcan's love, and her own growing understanding of the curse. "The curse, it's not unbreakable," Alira said, her voice gaining strength, fueled by a desperate hope. "There's a way to break it." Lorcan said so. Lyra's eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face, quickly masked by a renewed surge of anger. "He lies," she hissed. "He clings to false hope. There is no escape." "There is," Alira insisted. "The vow. The original vow. It's the key, isn't it? If we renew it, here at Silver Creek, where the magic is strongest, we can break the curse." It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to use Lyra's own power against her. Alira was relying on the fragmented memories, on the whispers of the past, on the instinctive knowledge that was growing within her. Lyra's face contorted with rage, her carefully constructed mask of composure cracking, revealing the raw, unhinged jealousy that fueled her power. "You dare?" she screamed. "You dare try to usurp my control? You are nothing. A fleeting shadow. You will not succeed." She unleashed a torrent of dark energy, a wave of power that crashed against the protective barrier of Silver Creek. The water surged and churned, the silvery light dimming, as if on the verge of being extinguished. Elira staggered back, her body trembling under the onslaught, but she held her ground, her gaze fixed on Lyra, her hand gripping the silver ring. She had to find Lorcan. She had to bring him here. Lorcan. She cried out, her voice echoing through the forest, a desperate plea that was both a prayer and a challenge. Lorcan, I need you. She waited, her heart pounding, her breath catching in her throat, listening for any sign of him. The battle between Lyra's magic and the protective power of Silver Creek raged around her, a chaotic dance of light and darkness. And then she heard it, a roar, a deep, guttural sound that resonated through the trees, shaking the very ground beneath her feet. Lorcan was coming. But even as relief washed over her, a new fear gripped her heart. Could they truly break the curse? Or were they doomed to repeat the cycle of tragedy, to relive the pain and loss that had haunted them for centuries? The dance was far from over, and the outcome remained terrifyingly uncertain. Where was he? Chapter 9. A touch that kindles flames. The roar echoed again, closer this time, followed by the crashing of branches and the thunder of approaching footsteps, or rather, paw steps. Elira held her breath, her gaze fixed on the edge of the forest, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The battle between Lyra's magic and the protective power of Silver Creek continued to rage, the water churning, the air thick with tension. Lorcan burst from the trees, a magnificent, terrifying figure of fur and fury. His golden eyes blazed with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the darkness, locking onto Elira, then shifting to Lyra, a snarl ripping from his throat. He was wounded, his fur matted with blood and mud, but his power was undiminished, a raw, untamed force that challenged Lyra's control. Lorcan. Elira cried out, relief flooding through her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. Lyra turned, her face a mask of fury, her ice-blue eyes burning with hatred. You persist, Wolf, she hissed. You cannot win. She will die, and you will be mine again. Lorcan ignored her, his gaze fixed on Elira. He crossed the distance between them in a few powerful strides, his massive form looming over her, both protective and possessive. He nudged her gently with his snout, a surprisingly tender gesture that sent a shiver through her, not of fear, but of something else. Something that felt achingly familiar, something that spoke of a love that had endured for centuries. Elira reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his fur, the coarse texture surprisingly soft beneath her fingertips. The contact sparked a jolt of energy, a warmth that spread through her body, chasing away the cold, the fear. She could feel his strength, his power, his love, flowing into her, bolstering her courage, reinforcing her resolve. The vow, she said, her voice low and urgent, her gaze locking with his golden eyes. We have to renew it. Here. Now. Lorcan nuzzled her again, a low rumble vibrating in his chest, a silent affirmation. He understood. Lyra screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration, and unleashed another wave of dark energy, more powerful than before. The water of Silver Creek surged, threatening to overwhelm the protective barrier, the silvery light dimming, almost extinguished. You will not, she shrieked. I will not let you break free. You are mine, Lorcan. Forever. Lorcan turned, facing Lyra, a terrifying snarl ripping from his throat. He stood between Elira and the sorceress, a shield against her power, his body taut and ready to defend her, to protect their chance at freedom. But Elira knew they couldn't defeat Lyra through force alone. The curse was too strong, too deeply ingrained. They had to use the power of their love, the power of their original vow, to break it. She stepped forward, standing beside Lorcan, her hand resting on his fur, drawing strength from his presence. She looked at Lyra, her gaze unwavering, her voice clear and strong, despite the fear that still churned within her. We made a vow, centuries ago, she said, her voice echoing through the clearing. A vow of love, of loyalty, of eternity. You tried to break it, Lyra, but you failed. Our love is stronger than your hatred, stronger than your curse. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and began to recite the words of the vow, the words that had echoed through her fragmented memories, the words that were etched into her very soul. I, Elira, take you, Lorcan, to be my soulmate, she said, her voice trembling slightly, but gaining strength with each word. To have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part and beyond. She looked at Lorcan, her eyes shining with tears, with love, with a fierce determination that burned brighter than any curse. And even death cannot break the bond between us. Our souls are intertwined, forever bound by a love that transcends time, that defies even the darkest magic. Lorcan responded, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that echoed through the clearing, a sound that was both human and wolf, a blend of two souls intertwined. I, Lorcan, take you, Elira, to be my soulmate, my love, my life forever. As they spoke the words of the vow, the air around them began to shimmer and glow, not with Lyra's dark magic, but with a pure, white light, a light that emanated from their intertwined souls, from the power of their love. The water of Silver Creek surged, the silvery light returning, stronger than before, pushing back Lyra's darkness, cleansing the air, restoring the balance. The touch between them kindled, not into flame, but into something stronger, something eternal. Was it enough? Chapter 10. The Weight of Centuries. The white light intensified, swirling around Elira and Lorcan, a vortex of pure energy that seemed to draw power from the very heart of Silver Creek. The air crackled with an almost palpable force, a tangible manifestation of their love, their bond, their renewed vow. Lyra screamed, a sound of pure agony and fury, as the light enveloped her, pushing back her darkness, shattering her control. Her magic flickered and died, her carefully constructed facade of power crumbling, revealing the raw, unhinged jealousy and desperation that lay beneath.
No,
she shrieked. You cannot. I will not let you. He is mine. He will always be mine. But her words were lost in the roar of the surging water, in the blinding intensity of the light. The curse, the ancient magic that had bound them for centuries, was breaking, unraveling, dissolving under the power of their love. Elira clung to Lorcan, her hand buried in his thick fur, drawing strength from his presence, from the unwavering love that shone in his golden eyes. She could feel the weight of centuries lifting from them, the burden of the curse, the pain and loss, the endless cycle of separation and reunion, fading, dissolving into nothingness. The light reached its peak, a blinding flash that illuminated the entire forest, then slowly subsided, fading, leaving behind a sense of peace, of serenity, of wholeness. The rain had stopped, the clouds parting, revealing a clear, night sky, filled with a million twinkling stars. And in the center of the sky, the full moon shone brightly, its silvery light bathing Silver Creek in an ethereal glow. Lorcan began to change again, his form shifting, shrinking, his fur receding, his features returning to their human shape. Elira watched, her heart filled with a mixture of awe and relief, as he transformed back into the man she had seen in her visions, the man she had loved centuries ago, the man she loved now. He stood before her, naked and vulnerable, his golden eyes filled with a love so profound, so all-consuming, that it took her breath away. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped her face, his thumb gently tracing the line of her cheekbone. Elira, he whispered, his voice husky with emotion. We're free. Tears streamed down Elira's face, tears of joy, of relief, of a love that had endured the test of time, that had overcome the darkest magic. She leaned into his touch, her body trembling, her heart overflowing. We're free, she repeated, her voice choked with emotion. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight, as if afraid to let her go. Elira buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and thunder, the scent that was uniquely him, the scent that was now inextricably linked to their love, their freedom. They stood there for a long moment, embracing, their bodies pressed together, their hearts beating as one, savoring the moment, the peace, the wholeness, the culmination of centuries of longing. Lyra was gone, vanished. Whether she had been destroyed by the breaking of the curse, or simply banished, Alira didn't know, and didn't care. All that mattered was that she and Lorcan were free. But even as they celebrated their freedom, a flicker of unease, a shadow of doubt, lingered in Alira's mind. The curse was broken, yes, but the weight of centuries, the memories of pain and loss, the scars of the past, remained. Could they truly move forward? Could they build a new life together, free from the shadows of their past? The weight was not physical, but it was there, pressing down on her. Would it ever truly lift? Chapter 11. Whispers of the Pack. The moon cast long, dancing shadows as Alira and Lorcan walked hand in hand, slowly, back towards Havenwood. The silence between them was comfortable, filled not with the unspoken tension of the past hours, but with a quiet understanding, a deep connection that transcended words. Alira's fingers were intertwined with Lorcan's, the warmth of his skin a reassuring presence against the lingering chill of the night. Lorcan had found some discarded clothes near the ruins, likely left by curious teenagers who frequented the abbey, unaware of its true history. They were ill-fitting, but sufficient to cover his nakedness, providing a semblance of normalcy in a situation that was anything but. As they neared the outskirts of Havenwood, Lorcan stopped, his gaze turning towards the dense forest that bordered the town. Alira followed his gaze, her senses heightened, attuned to any sign of danger. The night was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the hooting of an owl, the distant barking of a dog. But there was something else, something more. "They're here," Lorcan said, his voice low, a subtle rumble that resonated with a primal awareness. "My pack." Alira's heart skipped a beat. Pack. The word conjured images of wildness, of untamed power, of a world she was only just beginning to understand. She had seen Lorcan transform, had witnessed his primal strength, but the reality of his otherness was still settling within her. Will they accept me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, tinged with a nervousness she couldn't quite conceal. Lorcan turned to her, his golden eyes softening, filled with a reassuring warmth. He cupped her face, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "They will," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "You are my soulmate, Alira. My chosen one. They will respect that." He paused, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. "But it won't be easy. They are wary of outsiders. Of humans. Especially after what happened with Lyra." Alira nodded, understanding his unspoken concern. She was an outsider, a human, entering a world of ancient traditions, of primal instincts, of loyalties forged in blood and moonlight. It was a daunting prospect. From the depths of the forest, a chorus of howls erupted, a symphony of wild voices that sent shivers down Alira's spine. It was a sound both terrifying and beautiful, a call to the wild, a declaration of belonging. Lorcan answered the call with a howl of his own, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the trees, a signal of his return, of his presence. Then they emerged from the shadows. Wolves. Dozens of them. Their eyes glowing in the moonlight, their fur shimmering in shades of gray, black, and brown. They were magnificent, powerful creatures, their movements fluid and graceful, their presence both intimidating and awe-inspiring. They surrounded Lorcan, sniffing him, nuzzling him, welcoming him back with a mixture of deference and affection. Alira stood back, her heart pounding, feeling a mixture of fear and fascination. An older wolf, larger than the others, with fur the color of silver, stepped forward. His eyes, a piercing amber, met Lorcan's, and a silent exchange passed between them. This was clearly the alpha, the leader of the pack. Lorcan turned to Alira, his hand reaching for hers, drawing her forward. "Alira," he said, his voice low and steady. "This is Corvus, the alpha of the Silver Creek pack." Corvus, this is Alira, my mate. Corvus's gaze shifted to Alira, his amber eyes scrutinizing her, assessing her with a primal intensity that made her feel naked, exposed. The silence stretched, tense and heavy, the weight of the pack's judgment pressing down on her. Then, Corvus dipped his head, a gesture of respect, of acceptance. The other wolves followed suit, their howls softening, their eyes losing their wary gleam. "Welcome, Alira," Corvus said, his voice a deep rumble, surprisingly gentle. "Lorcan has spoken of you. We honor his choice." Relief washed over Alira, so potent it almost buckled her knees. She had been accepted. For now, at least. But as she looked at the faces of the wolves, at their watchful eyes, she knew that this was just the beginning. She had entered a new world, a world of ancient loyalties, of primal instincts, of unspoken rules. And she had a lot to learn. She also had to convince a pack of werewolves that she was no longer a threat, that the curse was truly broken. Could she? Chapter 12. The Price of Forbidden Love. The acceptance of the pack, while relief, felt tentative, fragile. Alira could sense their underlying wariness, the unspoken questions in their watchful eyes. She was an outsider, a human, and the history of Lyra's betrayal cast a long, dark shadow over her presence. Lorcan, sensing her unease, kept a protective arm around her waist, a silent reassurance, a constant reminder of his unwavering support. He led her towards the edge of town, towards a small, secluded cabin nestled among the trees. "This is where I stay," he said, his voice low, a hint of apology in his tone. The cabin was rustic, simple, a far cry from the comfortable cottage Alira had called home. But it was also a sanctuary, a place where they could be alone, away from the watchful eyes of both the pack and the townspeople. As they entered the cabin, Alira felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, the adrenaline of the past few hours finally fading, leaving her feeling drained, emotionally and physically. The cabin was sparsely furnished, but clean and surprisingly cozy. A fire crackled merrily in the hearth, casting a warm, inviting glow over the room. Lorcan guided her towards a worn, leather armchair near the fire, gently easing her into it. He knelt before her, his golden eyes searching hers, filled with concern. "Are you all right, Alira?" he asked, his voice soft, tender. Alira nodded, managing a weak smile. "Just tired," she whispered. "And overwhelmed." He took her hand, his touch sending a familiar warmth through her, chasing away the lingering chill. "I know," he said. "It's a lot to take in. But you're strong, Alira. Stronger than you know." He paused, his gaze turning serious, a shadow of regret flickering in his eyes. "I should have told you sooner," he said, his voice laced with a self-reproach that tugged at her heart. "About everything. About the curse, about Lyra, about my nature." Alira shook her head, her fingers tightening around his. "It's all right, Lorcan," she said. "I understand. You were protecting me." "Protecting you, and perhaps protecting myself," he admitted, a hint of bitterness in his tone. "From the pain of losing you again." He stood up, pacing restlessly before the fire, his movements agitated, his body still carrying the residual tension of his wolf form. "The curse, it took so much from us, Alira," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "Centuries of love, of life, stolen by Lyra's jealousy. And even though it's broken, the scars remain." He turned to her, his golden eyes filled with a profound sadness, a weariness that spoke of the burden he had carried for so long.
"There will be challenges," he said.
"The pack, they will accept you, eventually, but it will take time. And the townspeople, they may never fully understand." "And us?" Alira asked quietly. He met her gaze, the pain evident, but a new strength shone through. "We build," he said. "Slowly. But we build. We have waited centuries, Alira. We have an eternity to make up for." Alira felt a surge of determination, a fierce resolve to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had come this far, had overcome so much. She wouldn't let the shadows of the past, the doubts and fears, steal their future. She stood up, her legs shaky but firm, and walked towards him, her hand reaching out to touch his face, her fingers tracing the lines of his jaw, the curve of his lips. "We'll face them together," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We have each other, Lorcan. And that's all that matters." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a moment, savoring the feel of her hand against his skin. Then, he opened them again, his golden gaze locking with hers, filled with a love that was both ancient and new, a love that had endured the test of time, that had overcome the darkest magic. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tight, as if afraid to let her go. Alira buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and thunder, the scent that was uniquely him, the scent that was now inextricably linked to their love, their freedom, their uncertain future. The price of their love had been high, paid in centuries of loss and pain. But they were free now, and they would face whatever came next together. But would together be enough, after everything? Chapter 13. Scars of the Past. The following days settled into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Alira remained at the cabin with Lorcan, venturing out only occasionally, always with him at her side. The townsfolk of Havenwood, while not overtly hostile, regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Whispers followed her, glances were exchanged, doors were quietly closed as she approached. She was the outsider, the stranger, the woman who had appeared out of nowhere and captivated the town's most enigmatic resident. Lorcan, acutely aware of the town's scrutiny, tried to shield her from it, but he couldn't be everywhere at once. He had responsibilities to the pack, duties that required his attention, leaving Alira alone for stretches of time, facing the subtle, yet persistent, undercurrent of distrust. One afternoon, while Lorcan was away, Alira decided to visit her cottage, to retrieve some of her belongings, to reacquaint herself with the familiar comfort of her home. As she walked through the town square, she noticed a group of women gathered near the well, their conversation ceasing abruptly as she approached. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of disapproval and fear, followed her every move. Alira tried to ignore them, to focus on her task, but their silent judgment was like a physical weight, pressing down on her, making it difficult to breathe. She quickened her pace, her head held high, but her heart ached with a familiar loneliness, a sense of isolation that had haunted her for most of her life, now amplified by the town's unspoken condemnation. As she reached her cottage, she noticed that the front door was slightly ajar. Her heart skipped a beat, a sense of unease settling over her. She had been meticulous about locking up, had always been careful, even before the events of the past few weeks. She pushed the door open cautiously, her senses on high alert. The cottage was different. Not overtly ransacked, but subtly disturbed. A vase of flowers overturned, a cushion askew, a book left open on the table. It was as if someone had been searching for something, but had tried to conceal their intrusion. Alira felt a surge of anger, of violation. This was her home, her sanctuary, and someone had dared to invade it, to disrupt the peace she had so carefully cultivated. She moved through the cottage, her eyes scanning every corner, searching for any clue, any sign of who had been there. And then she saw it. On the mantelpiece, above the fireplace, where she always kept a small, framed portrait of her late husband, Thomas, there was a note. It was written in elegant, flowing script, on a piece of thick, parchment-like paper. Alira picked it up, her hand trembling, and read the words, her heart sinking with each line. The wolf's whore. You may have deceived him, but you cannot deceive us. You are not welcome here. Leave Havenwood before it's too late. The note was unsigned, anonymous, but the message was clear. She was not wanted. She was an outcast, a threat, a pariah. Tears welled up in Alira's eyes, tears of anger, of frustration, of a deep, abiding sadness. She had faced so much, had overcome so much, and yet she was still being judged, condemned, for a love she couldn't deny, a love that had endured for centuries. She crumpled the note in her hand, her knuckles white, her body trembling with suppressed rage. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to fight back against the injustice, the prejudice, the ignorance. But she knew it was futile. She couldn't change their minds, couldn't erase their fears, couldn't undo the damage that Lyra's curse had wrought. She sank into a chair, her head in her hands, her body racked with sobs. The scars of the past, both hers and Lorcan's, were proving to be deeper, more enduring than she had imagined. Could they truly build a life together, here, in this town, under the weight of such unrelenting suspicion? Could love really conquer all, even the ingrained prejudices of a small, isolated community? She wasn't sure anymore. The weight felt crushing. Chapter 14. The hunt begins. Alira sat in the gathering gloom of her cottage, the crumpled note a cold weight in her hand. The tears had dried, leaving a residue of anger and a gnawing sense of despair. She had to tell Lorcan, but the thought of adding to his burdens, of seeing the pain in his golden eyes, made her hesitate. She heard the familiar sound of his footsteps on the porch, the soft thud of his boots on the wooden floor. He entered the cottage, his gaze immediately drawn to her pale face, her red-rimmed eyes. "Alira?
What is it?"
"What's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern, his hand reaching out to touch her, to reassure her. She couldn't hold back the tears any longer. They streamed down her face, hot and heavy, a release of the pent-up emotions that had been building within her all day. She handed him the note, her hand trembling, unable to speak. Lorcan read the note, his face darkening with each word, his jaw clenching tight, his golden eyes flashing with a primal anger that Alira had only glimpsed before. He crumpled the note in his fist, his knuckles white, his body radiating a barely suppressed fury. "Who did this?" he growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sent shivers down Alira's spine. Alira shook her head, unable to answer. She didn't know who had written the note, who had invaded her home, who had threatened her. It could have been anyone in the town, anyone who feared her, who distrusted her, who saw her as a threat. Lorcan paced the room, his movements agitated, his wolf nature simmering just beneath the surface. He was a predator, a protector, and his mate had been threatened. His instinct was to hunt, to confront, to punish. "I will find them," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I will make them pay for this." Alira reached out, her hand touching his arm, trying to calm him, to temper his fury.
"Lorcan, no," she said.
"Violence won't solve anything. It will only make things worse." He stopped pacing, his gaze turning to her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "They threaten you, Alira," he said. "They invade your home, they call you names. I cannot stand by and do nothing." "I know," she said softly. "But we can't fight hate with hate. We have to find another way. We have to show them that we're not a threat, that we just wanted to live in peace." Lorcan sighed, the tension slowly ebbing from his body, his anger giving way to a weary resignation. He knew she was right, but his primal instincts, his protective urges, were difficult to control. "What do we do, Alira?" he asked, his voice laced with a vulnerability that tugged at her heart. Alira didn't have an easy answer. She knew that winning over the townspeople, erasing their fears and prejudices, would be a long, arduous process.
But she was determined to try.
"We stay," she said, her voice firm, resolute. "We show them that we're not afraid. We live our lives, openly, honestly, and we prove them wrong." She paused, a flicker of an idea sparking in her mind. "And maybe we can start by helping them, by showing them that we're not a threat, but an asset to the community." Lorcan looked at her, a glimmer of hope flickering in his golden eyes. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to try. For her. For them. As they discussed their options, a sudden commotion erupted outside, the sound of raised voices, of running footsteps, of barking dogs. Lorcan's head snapped up, his senses on high alert. "What is it?" Alira asked, her heart pounding with a sudden, inexplicable fear. Lorcan moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. His body tensed, his eyes narrowing, his features hardening into a mask of wary alertness. "It's the hunting party," he said, his voice a low growl. They're tracking something. Or someone." A cold dread washed over Elira. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, who the hunting party was after. And she knew that Lorcan's pack, bound by ancient laws and loyalties, would be forced to participate. The hunt had begun. But who was the prey this time? Chapter 15. A Promise in the Ruins. Lorcan's words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The hunting party. The implication was clear and terrifying. Elira's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation, to understand who, or what, could have provoked such a response from the town's most zealous and often most misguided citizens. "Who are they hunting, Lorcan?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, despite her efforts to remain calm. Lorcan didn't answer immediately. He continued to peer out the window, his gaze fixed on the flickering torches that moved through the darkness, his body taut and ready, a predator poised to defend his territory. "I don't know," he said, his voice a low growl, laced with uncertainty and fear. "But I have a bad feeling about this." He turned to her, his golden eyes filled with a fierce determination, a protective instinct that overrode everything else. "Stay here, Elira," he said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." Elira shook her head, her fear giving way to a stubborn resolve.
"No," she said.
"I'm going with you. I won't stay here, cowering in fear, while you face this alone." Lorcan hesitated, his protective instincts warring with his desire to keep her safe. He knew she was strong, resilient, but he also knew the dangers that lurked in the darkness, the prejudices that fueled the town's fear, the potential for violence. "Elira," he began, his voice laced with a plea. "No," she repeated, her voice firm, unwavering. "We're in this together, Lorcan. Remember? We face everything together." He looked at her, his golden eyes searching hers, seeing the determination, the courage, the love that shone within them. He knew he couldn't dissuade her, couldn't deny her the right to stand by his side. He nodded, a reluctant acceptance, a silent acknowledgement of their bond, their shared destiny. "All right," he said, "but stay close to me, and be careful." They left the cottage, stepping out into the darkness, the sounds of the hunt growing louder, closer. The air was thick with tension, with a scent of fear and adrenaline, with the primal energy of the chase. They followed the flickering torches, moving through the darkened streets, towards the edge of town, towards the ancient forest that bordered Havenwood. Elira could sense the pack's presence, their silent, watchful eyes following them, their loyalty to Lorcan unwavering, but their acceptance of her still uncertain. As they reached the edge of the forest, they saw them, the hunting party, a group of men, armed with torches, rifles, and hunting dogs, their faces grim, determined, their eyes filled with a zealous fervor that bordered on fanaticism. Leading the group was Silas Blackwood, a descendant of the town's founders, a man known for his rigid beliefs, his intolerance, his deep-seated fear of anything that deviated from his narrow definition of normal. He was the one who had likely written the note, the one who saw Elira as a threat, as an abomination. Silas saw Lorcan and Elira approaching, and his face hardened, his eyes narrowing, his hand tightening on his rifle. "Lorcan," he said, his voice cold, harsh. "You should not be here. This is town business." Lorcan stepped forward, placing himself between Elira and Silas, a shield against the man's hostility. "What's going on, Silas?" he asked, his voice calm, steady, but laced with an underlying warning. Silas's gaze shifted to Elira, his eyes filled with a mixture of disgust and fear. "We're hunting a creature," he said. "A beast that threatens our town, our way of life." Elira's blood ran cold. She knew, with a chilling certainty, what Silas meant. He was talking about a werewolf. But not Lorcan. Someone else. "It attacked one of our own," Silas continued, his voice rising, fueled by a righteous anger. "Injured him badly. We will not tolerate such savagery." We will hunt it down and eliminate it. Lorcan's body tensed, his wolf nature rising to the surface, his golden eyes flashing with a primal fury. He knew that Silas's words were a thinly veiled threat, a challenge, a declaration of war. But before Lorcan could respond, Alira stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, her gaze unwavering. "Who was injured?" she asked, her heart pounding with a desperate hope that her fears were unfounded. Silas looked at her, his eyes filled with contempt. "Old Man Hemlock," he said. "Found him near the ruins. Mauled. Barely alive." The ruins. Alira's mind raced. The ruins were a place of power, a place of memories, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. It was where she and Lorcan had broken the curse, where they had renewed their vow. And it was where another werewolf, drawn by the surge of energy, had likely crossed over. She looked at Lorcan, her eyes pleading with him to understand. He met her gaze, his expression mirroring her own growing realization, her own desperate hope that they could prevent further bloodshed. "We have to stop them, Lorcan," she said, her voice urgent, desperate. "We have to find the creature before they do." Lorcan nodded, his jaw clenched tight, his golden eyes filled with a fierce determination. He knew what they had to do. They had to protect the innocent, even if it meant risking their own lives, even if it meant facing the wrath of the town, the fury of the hunt. "We will," was his hoarse reply. "We will." He turned, starting back toward the place it had all begun. Come, Elira. Back to the Abbey. Chapter 16. Blood and Moonlight. The race against time, against prejudice, against the primal urge for vengeance, led them back to the crumbling abbey. The moon, full and luminous, cast long, eerie shadows across the ruins, painting the scene in shades of silver and black. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, of decaying stone, and of blood. Alira's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the night. They had to find the injured werewolf before Silas and his hunting party, before the situation escalated into a tragedy that could shatter the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. Lorcan moved with a swiftness and agility that belied his human form, his senses heightened, his wolf nature guiding him through the darkness. Alira followed close behind, her own senses on high alert, her mind racing, trying to anticipate the danger, to find a way to avert the impending disaster. They reached the ruined chapel, the place where they had broken the curse, where they had renewed their vow. The air here felt charged, the residual energy of their love, of their bond, mingling with the scent of blood, with the fear and desperation of the injured creature. "He's close," Lorcan said, his voice a low growl, his golden eyes scanning the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. "I can smell him." And then they heard it. A whimper, a low, mournful sound that tugged at Alira's heart, a sound of pain, of fear, of loneliness. They followed the sound, moving deeper into the ruins, towards a collapsed section of wall, where a pile of rubble and debris created a small, hidden alcove. And there, huddled in the shadows, was the werewolf. It was a young wolf, its fur matted with blood and mud, its body trembling with pain and exhaustion. One of its legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, and its eyes, a pale, frightened amber, reflected the moonlight, filled with a desperate plea for help. Alira's heart ached at the sight of the injured creature. It was just a child, in wolf years, barely more than an adolescent. It was lost, alone, and terrified, caught in a world it didn't understand, hunted for a crime it likely didn't commit. "Lorcan," she whispered, her voice filled with compassion, with a desperate need to help. Lorcan nodded, his own wolf nature recognizing the vulnerability, the innocence of the injured creature. He approached the alcove slowly, cautiously, his movements deliberate, his golden eyes radiating a calming, reassuring presence. "Easy, little one," he murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "We're not going to hurt you." The young wolf whimpered again, its body tensing, its eyes darting between Lorcan and Alira, unsure whether to trust them, whether to flee or to stay. Lorcan continued to approach, his hand outstretched, offering a silent promise of help, of protection. He spoke to the wolf in a language Alira didn't understand, a series of low growls and soft whines, a primal communication that transcended words. Slowly, hesitantly, the young wolf relaxed, its body losing some of its tension, its eyes losing some of their fear. It allowed Lorcan to approach, to touch its fur, to examine its injured leg. "It's broken," Lorcan said, his voice grim, his hand gently probing the injured limb. We need to get him to safety. To Corvus." But even as he spoke, they heard the sounds of the approaching hunting party, the baying of the dogs, the shouts of the men, the flickering of torches, growing closer, closer. "They're coming," Alira said, her voice filled with a desperate urgency. "We have to hurry." Lorcan looked at her, his golden eyes filled with a fierce determination.
"We will," he said.
He carefully scooped up the injured wolf, cradling it in his arms, his strength belying the creature's weight. "But where can we go?" Alira knew that time was running out. Lorcan's gaze was steady. "There's one place Silas won't follow," he replied. "One place they fear more than anything." He shifted the weight of the young wolf. "My pack's territory. The heart of the forest." He met her gaze, a grim determination solidifying. "We run, Alira." Chapter 17. The Serpent's Deception. The flight through the moonlit forest was a blur of shadows and sounds, of pounding hearts and ragged breaths. Lorcan, carrying the injured wolf, moved with a speed and agility that Alira could barely match, his senses heightened, his instincts guiding them through the treacherous terrain. She stumbled and fell, scraping her knees and hands, but the urgency of their escape fueled her onward, adrenaline masking the pain. The baying of the hounds grew closer, the shouts of the men echoing through the trees, a constant reminder of the danger that pursued them. Alira could feel the pack's presence, a silent, watchful escort, their eyes gleaming in the darkness, their loyalty to Lorcan unwavering, their protection a tangible force. They reached the heart of the forest, a place of ancient trees and hidden pathways, a sanctuary where the pack's power was strongest, where Silas and his men would be reluctant to follow. But even here, they weren't safe. The scent of blood, the desperation of the injured wolf, would be a beacon to the hunters, a trail they could follow. Lorcan lowered the young wolf gently to the ground, placing him near a hidden spring, its waters shimmering with a silvery light, a source of healing and rejuvenation. He turned to Alira, his face grim, his golden eyes filled with a concern that went beyond the immediate danger. We need to distract them," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Draw them away from here. Give Corvus time to help the young one." Alira nodded, understanding his plan. It was a dangerous gamble, a desperate attempt to protect the innocent, to prevent further bloodshed. But she was willing to risk everything, for Lorcan, for the young wolf, for the fragile peace they had fought so hard to achieve. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. Lorcan hesitated, his gaze searching hers, a conflict raging within him. He didn't want to put her in danger, didn't want to risk losing her again. But he knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed her help, her strength, her courage. We separate," he said, his voice laced with reluctance, with a fear he couldn't quite conceal. "I'll lead them away, towards the north. You stay here with the young one. Keep him safe." Alira shook her head, her heart pounding with a sudden, overwhelming fear.
"No," she said.
"I won't let you face them alone. We stay together." Lorcan opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, a voice, smooth and seductive, interrupted them. Such devotion, the voice purred. Such foolishness. They turned, their bodies tensing, their senses on high alert. A figure emerged from the shadows, slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the moment. It was a woman, tall and slender, with flowing black hair and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore a gown of shimmering green silk, adorned with intricate silver embroidery that seemed to writhe and shift in the moonlight. She was beautiful, alluring, but there was something unsettling about her presence, something that made Alira's skin crawl.
Who are you?
Lorcan growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, his wolf nature rising to the surface, sensing a threat. The woman smiled, a slow, predatory curve of her lips that revealed a hint of sharp, pointed teeth. "A friend," she said, her voice like velvet, smooth and seductive. "A guide. I can help you." Alira felt a surge of unease, a primal instinct that warned her to be wary, to distrust this creature. She didn't know who this woman was, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not a friend. "We don't need your help," Alira said, her voice firm, resolute, her gaze fixed on the woman's emerald eyes, trying to see through her deception, to discern her true intentions. The woman's smile widened, revealing more of her sharp teeth. "Oh, but you do," she said. "You are being hunted. You are outnumbered. You are desperate. I can offer you sanctuary, protection,
Power."
She glided closer, her movements fluid and graceful, her eyes locking onto Lorcan's, her voice dropping to a low, hypnotic murmur. "I can help you control your gift," she said. "Embrace your power. Become unstoppable." Alira saw Lorcan hesitate, his golden eyes flickering with a mixture of suspicion and something else. Something that looked like temptation. The woman was playing on his deepest desires, his primal instincts, his longing for control, for power, for a way to protect those he loved. "Don't listen to her, Lorcan," Alira said, her voice urgent, desperate. "She's lying. She's a serpent." The woman turned to Alira, her emerald eyes narrowing, her smile fading, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "You know nothing, human," she hissed. "You are weak, insignificant. You cannot comprehend the power that is within his reach." She turned back to Lorcan, her voice softening again, becoming seductive, persuasive. "Come with me, Lorcan," she said. "Let me show you. Let me help you become what you were meant to be." Lorcan stood there, torn between his loyalty to Alira, his distrust of the stranger, and the alluring promise of power, of control, of a way to end the hunt, to protect his pack, to secure their future. Which path would he choose? And what were the woman's true intentions? Chapter 18. Shattered Reflections. The tension in the clearing was palpable, a thick, suffocating blanket of unspoken desires and hidden dangers. Lorcan stood between Alira and the enigmatic woman, his body taut, his golden eyes flickering between the two, torn between his love for Alira and the alluring promise of power, of control, that the woman offered. Alira's heart pounded in her chest, a frantic rhythm of fear and desperation. She knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, beyond reason, that this woman was a threat, a danger far greater than Silas and his hunting party. She was a serpent, a deceiver, and she was trying to lure Lorcan into her trap. "Lorcan, don't," she pleaded, her voice trembling, her hand reaching out to touch his arm, to anchor him, to pull him back from the precipice. "Don't listen to her. She's lying." The woman laughed, a low, throaty sound that sent shivers down Alira's spine. "Lying?" She purred. "I offer him power, freedom, the ability to protect those he loves. What do you offer him, human? Weakness? Fear? A life of hiding, of running, of constantly looking over his shoulder?" Her words struck a chord, hitting Lorcan's deepest insecurities, his fears for Alira's safety, his frustration with the limitations of his own power. He looked at Alira, his golden eyes filled with a conflict that tore at her heart. "Alira," he began, his voice hesitant, uncertain. "No, Lorcan," Alira interrupted, her voice firm, resolute, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "Don't you see? She's trying to divide us. She's trying to exploit your desire to protect me, to use it against us." The woman's smile widened, revealing more of her sharp, pointed teeth. "Such insight," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "But you are wrong. I offer him a choice. A chance to embrace his true nature, to become something more." She turned back to Lorcan, her emerald eyes locking onto his, her voice dropping to a low, hypnotic murmur. Come with me, Lorcan, she said. Let me show you the power that lies within you. Let me help you become a god. Lorcan took a step forward, drawn in by the woman's words, by the promise of power, of control, of a way to end the hunt, to secure their future. Alira's heart sank. She had lost him.
Lorcan, no.
She cried out, her voice desperate, pleading.
Please.
Don't do this. He paused, his body trembling, his golden eyes flickering with a flicker of doubt. He looked at Alira, his gaze filled with a mixture of love, of longing, of regret. I have to, Alira, he said, his voice barely a whisper, laced with a pain that tore at her heart. I have to protect you. I have to protect the pack. He turned and followed the woman, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Alira alone, heartbroken and terrified. She sank to her knees, her body racked with sobs, her mind reeling, her world shattered. She had lost him. She had lost the man she loved, the man who had fought so hard to break free from the curse, to build a new life with her. He had chosen power over love, darkness over light. But even as despair threatened to consume her, a flicker of hope, a spark of defiance, remained. She wouldn't give up. She wouldn't let the serpent win. She would find Lorcan, and she would bring him back. She stood up, her legs shaky but firm, her eyes filled with a new determination, a fierce resolve that burned brighter than any fear. She had to find Corvus, the alpha of the pack. He was their only hope. As she turned to leave, she noticed something shimmering in the moonlight, near the spring where Lorcan had left the injured wolf. It was a small, silver pool, a reflection of the moon on the water. But as she looked closer, she saw that it wasn't just a reflection. It was something more. The water rippled, and an image formed, a vision, a glimpse of the future. She saw Lorcan, standing before the woman, his body surrounded by a dark, swirling energy. He was changing, transforming, not into his wolf form, but into something else. Something darker, more powerful, more monstrous. And then, she saw herself, fighting, struggling against the darkness, her hand reaching out to Lorcan, trying to pull him back, to save him from the abyss. The vision faded, leaving Alira shaken, terrified, but also determined. She knew what she had to do. She had to save Lorcan, not just from the serpent, but from himself. The reflection, the vision, had shown her the path. But could she walk it alone? Chapter 19. The Heart's True North. The image in the silver pool, a fleeting glimpse of a terrifying future, solidified Alira's resolve. She had to find Corvus, the alpha of the pack. He was their only hope, the only one who might be able to help her save Lorcan from the serpent's influence, from the darkness that threatened to consume him. She left the injured wolf in the relative safety of the hidden spring, trusting that the pack's protective instincts would extend to the vulnerable creature. She moved swiftly through the forest, her senses heightened, her mind focused on her goal. She had to be careful, had to avoid Silas and his hunting party, had to reach Corvus before it was too late. She found Corvus near the pack's den, a secluded cave hidden deep within the heart of the forest. He was surrounded by the other wolves, their eyes glowing in the moonlight, their bodies tense and watchful, their loyalty to Lorcan unwavering, but their concern for his absence palpable. Corvus saw Alira approaching, his amber eyes narrowing, his expression wary, but also respectful. He had accepted her as Lorcan's mate, had welcomed her into the pack, but he also knew the dangers that surrounded them, the threats that loomed in the darkness. Alira, he said, his voice a deep rumble, his gaze searching hers. Where is Lorcan? Alira didn't hesitate. She told him everything, her voice trembling with emotion, but firm and resolute. She told him about the serpent, about her alluring promises of power, about Lorcan's decision to follow her, about the vision she had seen in the silver pool. Corvus listened intently, his amber eyes darkening with each word, his body tensing, his wolf nature rising to the surface, sensing the danger, the threat to his pack, to his friend, to the balance of their world. When she finished, He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant trees, his mind racing, assessing the situation, formulating a plan. "This woman," he said, his voice low and growl, laced with a primal anger. "She is not what she seems. She is ancient, a creature of darkness, of deception. She seeks to control Lorcan, to use his power for her own twisted purposes." He turned to Alira, his amber eyes filled with a fierce determination, a protective instinct that extended beyond his pack, to the woman who had captured Lorcan's heart, the woman who had proven her courage, her loyalty, her love. "We will find him," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "We will stop her. We will bring Lorcan back." He turned to the other wolves, his voice rising, a call to action, a command that resonated with the ancient laws of the pack, with a primal urge to protect their own. "The hunt is reversed," he roared, his voice echoing through the forest, a challenge to the darkness, a declaration of war. "We hunt the serpent. We save our brother." The wolves responded with a chorus of howls, a symphony of wild voices that sent shivers down Alira's spine. It was a sound of unity, of purpose, of a fierce determination to fight for what was right, to protect what was theirs. Corvus turned back to Alira, his amber eyes softening, filled with a respect, an understanding that transcended words. "You are one of us now, Alira," he said. "You are family. We will face this together." Alira nodded, her heart filled with a surge of gratitude, of belonging, of a fierce resolve to fight alongside the pack, to save the man she loved, to defeat the darkness that threatened to consume them all. They set off, a united force, moving swiftly through the forest, following the faint trail of Lorcan's scent, guided by Corvus's instincts, by Alira's unwavering love, by the shared determination to bring him home. They were hunting the serpent, but they were also searching for Lorcan, for the man trapped within the darkness, for the heart that still beat true, even in the face of temptation, of power, of despair. Alira knew, with absolute certainty, that she would not fail. Her heart, and Lorcan's, depended on it. She would find her true north, no matter the cost. Chapter 20. The Reunion of Souls. The hunt led them to a hidden clearing, bathed in an eerie, green light that emanated from a swirling vortex of energy at its center. The air crackled with power, with a dark, twisted magic that made Alira's skin crawl. This was the serpent's lair, the place where she had taken Lorcan, the place where she was trying to corrupt him, to transform him into something monstrous. Standing at the edge of the vortex, his back to them, was Lorcan. But he was different. His body was shrouded in a dark, swirling energy, his features distorted, his eyes glowing with an unnatural, emerald light. He was no longer the man Alira loved, the man who had fought so hard to break free from the curse. He was something else. Something darker, more powerful, more lost. The serpent stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, her emerald eyes filled with a triumphant gleam, her voice a low, hypnotic murmur, weaving her spell, tightening her grip on his soul. Corvus and the pack spread out, surrounding the clearing, their bodies tense and watchful, their eyes fixed on Lorcan, their loyalty unwavering, but their hope flickering. They were ready to fight, to defend their own, but they also knew the power of the serpent, the danger that Lorcan now represented. Alira stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest, her fear battling with her love, with her unwavering determination to save him. She had to reach him, had to break through the darkness, had to remind him of who he was, of who they were together. "Lorcan!" She cried out, her voice echoing through the clearing, a desperate plea that cut through the eerie silence, through the serpent's hypnotic murmur. Lorcan turned, his head snapping towards her, his emerald eyes, so unlike his natural gold, focusing on her with a mixture of confusion and recognition. A flicker of his true self, a spark of the man she loved, remained within the darkness. "Alira," he whispered, his voice distorted, strained, as if fighting against the serpent's control. The serpent hissed, her hand tightening on Lorcan's shoulder, her emerald eyes narrowing, her smile fading, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. "He is mine now, human," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You cannot have him." Elira ignored her, her gaze fixed on Lorcan, her heart reaching out to him, her love a beacon in the darkness. "Lorcan, please," she pleaded. "Remember who you are. Remember us. Remember our vow." She began to recite the words of their vow, the words that had broken the curse, the words that were etched into their very souls. "I, Elira, take you, Lorcan, to be my soulmate to have and to hold, from this day forward for better or worse to love and to cherish, until death do us part and beyond." As she spoke the words, a faint, white light began to emanate from her, from the silver ring on her finger, a symbol of their love, of their bond, of their enduring connection. The light grew stronger, brighter, pushing back the darkness, challenging the serpent's power. Lorcan cried out, a sound of pain, of struggle, of a soul torn between two worlds. He clutched his head, his body trembling, his emerald eyes flickering, the darkness battling with the light, the serpent's control warring with his own will, with his love for Elira. Corvus and the pack howled, their voices joining Elira's, their loyalty, their support, adding to the power of her love, creating a wave of energy that washed over Lorcan, weakening the serpent's grip, strengthening the flicker of his true self. "Lorcan!" Elira cried out again, her voice filled with a desperate hope, with an unwavering belief in his strength, in his love. "Fight it, Lorcan. Fight it. Come back to me." And then, with a final, agonizing cry, Lorcan broke free. The emerald light in his eyes faded, replaced by the familiar golden glow. The darkness that had shrouded his body dissipated, his features returning to their human form. He stumbled, collapsing to his knees, his body trembling, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief, of exhaustion, of love. "Elira," he whispered, his voice weak, but clear, his gaze locking onto hers, his heart reaching out to her, bridging the distance between them. Elira rushed to him, kneeling beside him, her arms wrapping around him, holding him tight, as if afraid to let him go. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and thunder, the scent that was uniquely him, the scent that was now, once again, a symbol of their love, their freedom, their enduring connection. The serpent screamed, a sound of pure rage and frustration, as her power was broken, her plans thwarted, her prey reclaimed. The vortex of energy dissipated, the eerie green light fading, leaving the clearing bathed in the soft, silvery glow of the full moon. Corvus and the pack approached, their howls softening, their eyes filled with relief, with gratitude, with a renewed respect for Elira, for the power of her love, for the strength of her spirit. They were safe. They were together. They were free. The reunion of souls was complete. But the final battle was won together. Epilogue. The years that followed were not without their challenges. The scars of the past, both physical and emotional, lingered, a constant reminder of the battles they had fought, the losses they had endured. The townspeople of Havenwood remained wary, their prejudices slow to fade, their fear of the unknown a persistent undercurrent in their interactions with Lorcan and Elira. But time and patience and unwavering love slowly began to heal the wounds, to bridge the divides, to build a new foundation of trust and understanding. Elira, with Lorcan at her side, became an integral part of the community, using her art, her compassion, her quiet strength to connect with the townspeople, to show them that she was not a threat, but a friend, a neighbor, a fellow human being. She opened a small art studio in town, offering classes to children and adults, sharing her passion for creativity, fostering a sense of community, of belonging. She painted the landscapes of Havenwood, the ancient forest, the crumbling abbey, the shimmering waters of Silver Creek, capturing the beauty of their world, the resilience of its people, the enduring power of love. Lorcan, while still maintaining his responsibilities to the pack, became a protector of the town, a silent guardian, watching over its inhabitants, ensuring their safety, bridging the gap between the human and the supernatural worlds. He used his strength, his instincts, his ancient wisdom, to help those in need, to resolve conflicts, to maintain the peace. Corvus and the pack, while remaining wary of outsiders, gradually accepted Alira as one of their own, recognizing her strength, her loyalty, her unwavering love for Lorcan. They became a silent, watchful presence, protecting the town, guarding its borders, ensuring its survival. The young werewolf, healed and recovered, joined the pack, finding a home, a family, a place of belonging. He became a symbol of hope, of resilience, of the enduring power of compassion. Alira and Lorcan, their love deepened and strengthened by the trials they had faced, built a life together, a life filled with love, with laughter, with a quiet, enduring joy. They revisited the ruins often, the place where their journey had begun, the place where they had broken the curse, the place where they had renewed their vow. They stood hand in hand, beneath the full moon, their souls intertwined, their love a beacon in the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, of the supernatural bond, of a love that had transcended time, that had defied even death itself. They created new memories, joyful ones, to layer over the scars, to create a tapestry of a shared life, rich and full. They built a home. They built a life that had very nearly not been. And as the years turned into decades, and the decades into centuries, Alira and Lore,